And certainly, if anything pops up or if you're unsure about something, we'll be happy to share information with you as much as possible. So without further ado, I'm going to throw this over to Chris and Andy. Chris is the Senior Development International Development Officer for USA with Chelsea, and then Andy is actually the under 13. I think that's right, Chris. Is it still under 13? He's the under
13 head coach. Yeah,
under 13 Academy head coach. So we're really happy for both Chris and Andy to join us today. So I appreciate it. Over to you, Chris.
Great, thank you, Adam. Let me just go ahead and share my screen if that's possible.
Yes.
Great. There. Okay, yes, thank you very much, Adam. Thank you for having myself and Andy. It's always a pleasure to obviously be involved with anything that you guys are presenting. We've had a great relationship over the last couple of years, and yeah, thank you for having us during this Coaches Connection. Always nice to sort of share a little bit of an insight from our side at Chelsea Football Club here in obviously the UK. And what we're going to be going through today a little bit is around our return to play, some of the protocols and measures that we've had to sort of go through from a community and a academy perspective. We'll touch a little bit around the men's and women's as well, but predominantly it's going to be some of the guidelines that we've had to take on board through government, through FA, through Premier League. And yeah, excited to obviously share this with you. And then what we'll do is I'll do the front part. We'll hand over to Andy around our academy and his return. And then we'll touch base on some questions towards the ends as well. So quick introduction. As Anna said, yeah, my name is Chris Woodward, the Programme Development Manager for our international department. So as I'm sure you can imagine, during this sort of unprecedented time, during COVID, there hasn't been much international travel. So we've been very much domestically based here in the UK and how we can support the programmes running here. We've been very heavily involved with the restart from the club and as mentioned through different elements, through government, NHS, Premier League and FA. But I've been at the club for 13 years now. I've predominantly started as a football coach, as we all do. Managed to progress myself through a little bit to our academy, pre-academy development centres at sort of under 7, under 8s. I'm fortunate enough to work within the women's and girls game as well for 6 years. I managed to take our under 9s to under 13s. And some of our under 18 boys and girls college academies as well. I'll hand you over to Andy just to give a little brief background on him, and then we'll kick us off.
Thanks, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. So, yeah, brief background. Worked at the club for probably too many years, probably 12 plus years now. And again, with Chris, a mixture of everything, starting off in the community and doing after school club programs to working internationally. And looking after the majority of things that went on in the US, and I was overseeing and looking after that program. So now the last 4 years working with the academy, being head coach of under 12s, and then the last 3 seasons being head coach of the under 13s. Again, worked with girls teams in the past from various ages, and have worked with college teams, so players that are up to under 19. So worked with a few teams. With that, I am now and help out with Chris and assist all coach education for the international department that we have, and coaches that are abroad and in other countries that are mainly Chelsea staff but living there. I help with their coach education. So I think that'll do. I'll do some more talking later.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. So you can probably tell from Andy, he's actually currently at the training ground and going to be preparing after this to
grass pitches, Chris.
to be getting out with his under 13s this evening. So yeah, thanks for joining us, Andy. That's great. Heading forward a little bit then, and just touching base around the guidance that we've received. As I suppose, a community, grassroots and football development department within the UK domestically, we've had a lot of guidance from obviously the UK government and the FA predominantly they're the ones that have led on a lot of the restart and the governance around the measures and protocols that are put in place around COVID. We obviously, as a club, we work heavily with our health and safety teams, safeguarding, human resources and legal teams to ensure that, I think moving forward for the foreseeable future, that's going to be very heavily involved around, different measures and protocols that are in place. And it's very fluid. It is a little bit ever changing at the moment as well. And then the Premier League have guided the academy, the men's and the women's teams. So the more elite pathway, the Premier League has actually guided that. There's obviously some similarities in the measures and protocols that will be put in place, but I think the timelines slightly stagger from the grassroots community football development to more the elite pathway. And we'll touch a little bit around sort of the men's and women's as well, but not too heavy. Moving on, so just looking around our timelines of events and give you a little bit more of an overview of sort of what we've been through over the last sort of 6-7 months. Towards the back end of February, obviously it was when it was starting to really peak a little bit here in the UK. Back end of February, certainly early March is when a lot of measures had to be put in place while we were still at work, as it were. So the COVID-19 measures and protocols from the club, when staff and players were still based at the training ground in Stamford Bridge in London, there was obviously a lot of protocols starting to be put in place then while we were still working. The business continuity planning as well throughout that period was one from the club of all departments, domestic sort of community, but also the elite pathway and every other department from sort of merchandising, from the hotels at Stamford Bridge. Everyone had to go through this procedure in a way for us to understand what may happen during this time. And again, very difficult to plan that when, no one really knew too much around what COVID was during that period, which led us on to early March. That's when, for us, we started to see here in the UK, the extreme spike in cases. We did have all of our activities domestically ceased within our community foundation departments. At the time, we had a lot of measures that we couldn't move from site to site. So we couldn't go from the training ground to Stamford Bridge. And then once the UK government actually acted on that and decided to put the country into lockdown, that's when a lot of the sites were closed and were encouraged to work from home and work remotely. And ultimately that led to the Premier League being suspended at the time, and no more activities to sort of go ahead. And naturally, I think for everybody during this period, it was very different. No one really knew what was going to happen, and working remotely from home and trying to engage different people, staff and players within the club was challenging because, again, no one really had too much guidance around that at the time. So we had to think on our feet a little bit during that period, which went into April, where we did work remotely. We did find our feet. We had ongoing government and NHS guidelines in place. We couldn't go out, as I'm sure everyone was aware, very similar, I'm sure, to the US, that, essential shops were only open, and it was a case that now we had to communicate in a different way. And having conversations with Adam, I think we're experts now in Zoom and team meetings and everything else ongoing with online chat now. So at least that areas we've got a little bit more better on. And then going into May, so we started now to look with the club and go, right, project restart. It got to a period where we had a lot of downtime, a lot of planning and processing to do. We had a lot of club support from, as I mentioned, from our health and safety team and safeguarding predominantly. They've been a massive help to us. Ultimately, we have a group of coaches domestically, I think up to 300 coaches domestically. A number of different departments across the southeast of England where we would normally have activity running. So to be in a period where we didn't have any activity and coaches sitting at home, but we needed them to work, we had to get them to do different elements, I suppose. And this gave us an opportunity to work online with online player development. This was very much based on some of our teams and some of our programming here domestically, that we could actually engage them online. A lot of the clubs, a lot of the Premier League clubs even did that, with players training from home and trying to keep them match fit during these periods. But the Project Restart was very much geared towards government guidelines on playing individually and small group training, which we managed to start in June. So again, a lot of our domestic foundation activities, because we missed a lot of our programming from March through to May, which is that term before the summer holidays, we were able to try and incorporate small group training sessions. This was at other facilities than our training ground, and try and incorporate and catch up on a lot of the players' development within small groups. So again, a lot of those measures that were put in place, and I'm sure similar to the US, around social distancing within sessions, hygiene, making sure that all the sessions were safe for all involved, players and coaches. And then during that period in June, fortunately, through the Premier League, they managed to get the remainder of the season up and running for that June-July period to see it out. Unfortunately for us, Liverpool did lift the title. I think it was inevitable at the time, but yeah, the Premier League managed to come back, which was great. I think for everybody involved, we just wanted a little bit of football in their lives. So when it came to July, we had our return of our community football. So all of that planning and prepping with our Project Restart and with the club, we managed to get that back up and running with small group training at first. This was very much phased in over a period that the FA gave us guidelines of players, I think small groups of 5. With a coach, it made it 6 players. And then over a number of weeks through sort of July and August, this is now when the phased approach came back in, and we very much took the guidance from the FA. So our return to community football and training, we were able to get back to some form of normality, but with all of the measures and procedures that we had to have in place as well to make it safe for everybody. We've managed to run camp formats throughout our July period, purely for the fact that, again, we wanted to run our camp-based programs, but again, with a slightly different format. And over those weeks, it was phased from up to 6 players. I think every 2 weeks it went up by a number, went up to by around 4 players. So went from 6 to 10 to 14, and managed to then have squad-based training, which was very much non-contact at first. And then they started to play sort of in-house contact games, small-sided games to start with, and then went on to our community pre-season fixtures and festivals, which came last month, where we saw a lot of community and grassroots football being played. Very mixed opinions on how quickly that did come back from the FA. We tried to phase our teams and our contact games and fixtures back in slightly slower than the FA did, just because we wanted to make sure our procedures and our measures were in place throughout. And during the August period, as Andy, I'm sure we'll touch on in a short while, we managed to return our academy, some of our younger academy players back in, and we'll show you a little bit of insight around our training ground and the bubbles and the areas of our training ground that were sort of all cordoned off for certain age groups and certain teams. And that leads us into now, September. The FA have said that they are looking to get their community and grassroots leagues resuming. The Premier League season, obviously very excited about that's going to be up and running this weekend coming. And then they're looking at planning the academy fixtures from sort of back end of September, October time, and hopefully get back to that a little bit of that normality. So that sort of gives you a little bit of timeline of our events, of what we went through, and a little bit of detail there. And then just looking at around our sort of return to play in our community activities. Again, we've seen a little bit around the US soccer and their phases that they put back in, you know, around obviously 1, staying at home, 2, coming into small or individual training, 3 was coming back into smaller group, but maybe contact for us, and then going on to more team and I suppose competition-based training and fixtures. This is a little bit of an outline as well of some of the measures and protocols that, again, we've been guided on, but also from a standpoint of our own facility, one being obviously the training ground, and then all of our external facilities that we work in domestically. And again, it's probably similarities to what's happening across the world, really, with regards to any sort of team sports. But, you know, before our activities, we've had to go through a lot of this with regards to our self-declarations, self-assessments, temperature checks upon arrival. That's quite key for us, that we need that information to ensure that it's safe for everybody on site. We've then had to conduct all of our risk assessments. We've actually provided some coaches' handbooks for every facility that we work within, and have all of the protocols within them. And looking at our sign-in processes, sign-out processes after their activity, all of the activity during the practices. But before looking at that activity, we had to make sure that we sort of look back through all of our safeguarding measures and work with our teams here in the UK to ensure that everybody understood what those measures were being put in place, and almost code of conducts that were signing off before the return to play and return to activity. You know, all of the stuff around the hygiene, I think, is self-explanatory, making sure that there's sanitation stations, participants are arriving changed. You know, we couldn't use any indoor facilities, and we still can't at the moment. We're actually working outdoors only. Andy may touch on that a little bit around our indoor facilities at our training ground. And we had to make sure that our staff were planning accordingly when they are back into those sessions. You know, pre-planning for maybe smaller sided activities, social distancing within those activities were very important. During the activity, it was just making sure that those players as well knew that the code of conducts. Andy's going to actually touch on a little bit around our time management of the sessions and the shorter periods of play, but within maybe certain sized areas. There's an insightful sort of risk assessment that they're having to go through the Premier League and the academy. And there's other protocols we were looking of, you know, the equipment within the sessions, ensuring that there was limited movement of that equipment, sanitation of equipment, ensuring that our spectators and groups on site are limited, so maybe just drop off or collection rather than spectators watching. So a lot of measures that were put in place to ensure the safety of everybody involved. And then just a little bit here around our sort of after activity. I think the main point here for us was the communication between players, participants, coaches, managers within these environments, because again, with everything and the winter coming in, it's going to be even more challenging in the fact that there's going to be, you know, flu-like symptoms, colds. There's going to be a little bit of mixed messages. You know, do we need to report in? So making sure all those reporting guidelines for everybody involved as well are adhered to, and we want that communication with everybody involved. The openness, I suppose, for us is important, and that we have people ready to you know, to talk to everybody involved. You know, if there are symptomatic cases or any cases of COVID, then we will have to go through obviously all of our measures and guidelines and tracking, but also then working with the government and our NHS tracking trace system as well. So still lots to think about, but a little bit of around our community activity. And then just leading on to a little bit, I'll hand you over to Andy to sort of start explaining a little bit of what they've gone through. And this just gives us an insight into an aerial shot of our training ground, and Andy will explain it a little bit more.
Cheers, Chris. Yeah, so from listening to Chris there and obviously working with him, you can see how much detail and how much thoughts and tick boxes we must go through to get back into training, and being with the academy players, first team players, ladies players, it's probably been even more so. It's been a little bit backwards here in the fact that kids that are playing for local grassroots teams and playing for their local teams have actually been able to go back and train a little bit longer than we have, although we've got these fantastic facilities and can put all these things in place and in order to make sure everyone's safe. I'm not sure that's being done everywhere. So just quickly on this picture here, you can see some Adam and obviously some of the guys have been really fortunate and come over to us, and they have been around our training facility, which is, Chris, 140 acres.
Yes, yeah, 140 acres, around
140 acres.
36 full-size pitches, I think it works out as, but yeah, around 140 acres.
Yeah, so we're very, very fortunate in what we have, but our training ground has been split up like this for this moment in time. So where this green and red points are here, that's the first team, men's first team building, and there's pitches either side of this building, and this red coned off area is a bubble of people that nobody else at the club is allowed to interact with. So that bubble of people there is around 70 to 80 players, 25 to 30 of those 70 to 80 people, 25 to 30 of those being players, and everyone in that red bubble and that red zone, that is the only place on the whole of Cobham that they are allowed to go to on our training ground. And every person in that bubble will be getting tested a few times a week to make sure that there is no positive cases, and also to make sure that there is no spread. We have the same process for the women's department and the women's first team down in the yellow area. They have their own coned off area, part of the training ground, that they are the only ones that are allowed into. Their staff and their players will be in a separate bubble and not allowed to interact with any of the men's first team, including staff. And we've had to work really closely to assign those bubbles so who can mix together. The blue bubble you have here, where you have the women, the academy training area and the academy building, and this big white area here is actually an indoor area, an indoor dome. In this blue area and the one over here that says U23/loans, we actually have 3 bubbles in that space. So in that space is the U16, the U18s, and the U23/loans. But again, those 3 bubbles are not allowed to interact and intermingle with each other and be at Cobham and training at the same place at the same time. So for example, the under 16s may have to come in the morning, they would have to train earlier. All of those would then have to leave the site. The under 18s could then come in and train at a later time, not using the same facilities, but be using the same area. The under 23s, they've got their own training area that they can go and play in. So all of those ones that we've talked about so far, all of those players and staff and people in those bubbles will be getting tested regularly to see if they've had COVID or if they've had COVID, and if they have, then it will be dealt with accordingly. In this purple bubble where I'm currently sitting is our activity for all our academy players from under 8 up until under 14s now, because our under 15s that it says here have actually joined our under 16s bubble. And that is because our under 15 players at Chelsea, the majority of them are actually full-time with us and don't go to school, normal school. They get schooled by us and train with us every day. So our under 8s to under 14s are down in this purple bubble, this purple area where I'm currently sitting. Now, the players in this area, as players, parents, staff, they have not been tested. Because, and the reason behind that is because it's so many people, and also because we've had these players going back to school, they're interacting with so many people, and also because the younger players and younger people have not been as much of a threat as if they have had it. The bits that we are really taking sure and making sure that we are being safe is that every player in this bubble must fill in a questionnaire every day before they come in and tick that they are feeling okay, not got a temperature. Once they turn up to the training ground, their temperature will be taken twice, once on arrival and once coming into the car park, to make sure that everyone in the car is not got a high temperature. If they have, then they will be spoken to, doctors will be there, they'll be turned around and sent home. And then how we've managed our training is that we've had to split our training so that no age groups are, we've had to split our training so there's enough space, and that no two age groups back to back are training next to each other. So for an example, this evening that is training is our under 13s, our under 11s, our under 9s. So we'll be training this evening, and then tomorrow evening the even age groups will train. Chris, can you just go to the next slide? Here we have just something that was sent to us by the Premier League, and it looks quite confusing, but it's really not. For a second, if you're looking at the top, if you can just ignore the colours, so ignore the green, the red, the yellow and the orange, and literally just look at the numbers down the side here. So we've got a classification. So this is the drill duration, so how long it lasts. So very short, moderate and long. And then at the top here, it's the drill size. So the actual size of the area that we are using. Is it a large area? Is it a medium, small or very small area? And now for every part of my training session that we are doing as coaches, it goes, and I think it's helped us, we have to do additional planning to the area size and what we are doing. So for an example, if we come in and we do a part of a warm-up, and that warm-up is for 5 minutes, that on the left-hand side here is classed as very short, and that would be a 1 point here. At the same time, I might be doing that warm-up though in a small area, which is classed as a 3 at the top. So I then scroll down, 3 and a 1, so that gets me a yellow 3 in here. Okay. We might be playing a 11v11 game for under 13s. So the length of that we would be clever with and be smart with. I don't want to be going that we're going to do this for a long period of time. So straight 20 minutes and playing in a large area. Give me a score of 4, I might be able to look at my timings and say, okay, let's play only 10 minutes, because that would bring my score down to a 3. And hopefully that makes sense. And I'll give you a couple of examples of a training session and what that's looked like. But it's basically, it's made us as coaches think, okay, what are we doing tonight? What area size have we got? And how long are we doing it for? Because the information that we have been given here on this guidance by the Premier League and from our doctors is that the longer players or whoever it is spend time together in a short space, the more likely it is that they are going to spread and contact and be contagious if people have anything. So the more we can keep people apart and the bigger areas we use, it's a lot safer. And the research that's coming out here is that activities in outdoor space compared to indoors are way safer. That is why right now we are not using any indoor spaces, and all our buildings at Cobham are closed and people can't go into. Chris, if you just go to the next one, I'm talking about a session plan. So here I've just got some generic questions that I need to fill in at the top, and you can kind of read through those yourselves that I need to fill in before training and during training. I have to see if these points are met. But I was just going to talk you through a session plan that I did a couple of weeks ago and how it looks. So I have a group of, at the moment training this evening, there will be 24 outfield players. On this evening, it must have been slightly less, must have been around, what do I have it? Yeah, it must have been around 24 for this evening. So I had 2 groups of 12 here. And this is how I filled this form in. So for the warm-up, where you can see the individual ball work and stretches, we split the boys up and we put them into 3 groups. So there was only 7 in a group. I have to mark down how long the activity was, the area size that we use, and that gives me a risk rating of what it was like. We also then look at this training session, and the session itself is very simple. If you think about it, is that station number 1 was a passing drill that had a finish at the end. That was for 7 players. The duration of that practice was 12 minutes. So if I go back to the previous screen, that gives me a duration classification of a 3. The area size that I used was a medium size area. So that gives me a 3, which gives my complete risk rating for that one activity a 9. The next one is a 3v3 plus 1 possession, playing into 4 goals. 8 players again, duration 12 minutes. That 12 minutes tells me that it is 3 on the classification. The area size that I used was a medium size. Risk gives me a 9. And then a movement session is basically not with a football coach, but goes away and works with one of our movement specialists or strength conditioning team. He took 8 players, but he actually he had 8 players, worked for 12 minutes. Which gives me the 3, but he actually used a whole field for that. So his area space was very large. So the score for that activity was a 3. This is the bit where we've got to be quite clever with our planning and our scoring system here. But I think it's helped and it's improved our training and what we have done, because we're really homing in on the details of training and blocking out training. So you can see here that we played for 6 lots of 5 minutes. Then we did our coaching in the break when they go and get the footballs in, go and get a drink, go and rotate and spread out and get out of that tight area before coming back in and playing again. So at the bottom here, between these last 2 of the 4-goal game and the game, we had 4 teams. 2 teams were playing in a 4-goal game, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. And then 2 teams were playing on a pitch. But to make sure that they weren't just playing and all being in the same area at the same time, is that after every 5 minutes, we would rotate the teams around and send them on a break. Now, we did this activity here on a whole pitch. So we had a 2-goal game, 2 goalkeepers playing in half an 11v11 field in one half, so 12 players, and a 4-goal game going in the other half, relating to 12 players. So if you looked on that pitch at one time, there was 24 players, but which brings up my numbers. But what brings my scoring down low and keeps it down low is the fact that every activity they were doing was only for 5 minutes. And the area size they were using, half a pitch with 12 players in, that gave me a score of a low score, or I was using a large area, which means my overall score was only a 2. And I hope that kind of makes sense. If there are any questions on that, then please let me know. The bits that we are lucky with at the moment is we have 2 more weeks of being able to train out on the grass. So this evening, we will have 24 players on one 11v11 field. So tonight's plan of action is that me and 2 other members of staff, similar setup to this, we will set up 3 training stations on that one pitch. 1 training station will be a passing pattern in half a pitch. 1 will be a movement session again. So our movement guy working with the boys, but with a football, but we'll have specific movement in that. Our theme for the night is playing out from the back. So he's going to be working on defenders' footwork and foot patterns. And then I'm going to do an exercise, which is 3 versus 2 and defending when outnumbered. So that will be going on in quarter of a pitch, movement session in quarter of a pitch, and a passing pattern in half a pitch. After we've rotated those round, we will have a block of work for 15 minutes. But because we don't want to have the boys working solidly for 15 minutes, how we're going to work that is we'll block it out and they will do the activity for 3 lots of 4 minutes. So their actual work time is 12 minutes. And after 4 minutes, they have a break, go get a drink if they need it, go get the footballs back in if they need it, spread out, come out of the area that we've used to spread out before coming back into the area to make sure that it is safe, make sure that it is good to go again. After we've rotated around those 3 stations, this evening, we're going to do an attack versus defence using 3/4 of the pitch. So I will have 7 or 8 players defending, working with me. There'll be an attacking coach that will have 7 or 8 players, and he will be in control of them, working on attacking to try and score. And then the last group of players, 7 or 8, they will again be with the movement coach, but this time they're going to be working on a little bit of fitness work. And again, we're going to work in each one of those stations for 3 lots of 4 minutes to break it up and make sure that everyone's not on top of each other and too close. I will work with a defending team for 12 minutes. Once they have been with me for 12 minutes, all of the groups will go get a drink and a break. the team that was with me will become the attacking team. The attacking team will go to the movement coach, and the movement group will come to me and will become the defenders, and we'll rotate round. So in a 90-minute training session this evening, the boys will get a warm-up and some stretching, but they will get some 1v1s, they'll get some overloads, they will get a passing pattern, so lots of technical work there. We're working on playing out from the back, like I said. So we'll then do an attack v defence, where they will all be in a defensive team, attack v defence, where they all get to be an attacking team, and they will all get some football fitness or some football-based fitness in there as well with the movement coach. And that will be tonight's 90-minute session on one pitch, which is very good, and we're very lucky to be able to do that. The difficulty we're going to have is in 2 weeks' time, and we're already starting to plan, and this is where it's good that I've got to look at and it makes me think about my area size and my duration of activity, is in 2 weeks' time, we won't have the lights here in the evenings, so we will then have to move to the field turf, and once we go on the field turf, we're only going to have a quarter of a field turf, and again, I will probably have 24 players. So now I'm going to have to start being creative, even more so with my session timings and what I'm doing. And after each activity in a small, tight, compact area, they're going to have to spread out, go get a drink, go get the footballs in, go take their time before coming back in and then working hard again. Chris touched on it briefly, but about the equipment, we have to make sure the equipment is cleaned after training sessions. So we have a wipe down and solution that we have to use it. None of the players are allowed to touch the cones, the poles, and that type of equipment. Obviously the footballs they can. Us as coaches wear gloves to put out the equipment to make sure that we are not using our hands and getting skin on skin there. We'll be using the gloves to be able to put out. We will collect all the gear in, and then at the end of training everything will get washed down. Any player in the training session, and again comes back to planning, any player that needs to wear a bib, that one player has to wear that bib the whole time. We can't rotate and have a red team, 4 players take it off, give it to 4 other players, and 4 new players wear that red bib. Once the bib has been used, it's kind of, that's it for the night. It can't be used again. So again, we have to be clever with our planning. And if we're doing a possession practice, can it be a possession practice that are the same teams for the game, so that the same players can wear those same bibs going forward with training? The end of every training session, all the pinnies, all the bibs get taken away and get to be washed, ready to be brought back the next day. So we stop that contamination across people. And I think that's everything for now, but I'm sure we must have some questions on what we have. So please, guys, type away or ask away, or Adam, please feel free to come back on here. I know me and you have spoken about this last week. So if there's any questions or you think anything that the guys will be interested in hearing about, then please let me know.
I think you might be on mute, Alan.
I know a lot of people are still absorbing all that information, which is great, but just one real quickly, I know you're short on time, and I know you've got practice coming up pretty soon, but wanted just one real question. In terms of the risk score accumulation, what's the highest number and what's the lowest number? How does that go?
So Chris, if you go back to the previous slide, so here it is at the bottom right here. So anything that's in red is obviously really bad, and obviously 60 plus is not allowed. We've been told right now that we've got to keep everything below 50, so nothing to high to medium risk here. Everything that we do needs to be below 50, ideally at 40. At the accumulated points that we have. But I think when I spoke to you before, Adam, I think it's just us as coaches really just being logical with what we're doing, and just having a thought idea. If I've got a 6v6 possession on half a 7v7 pitch and I'm working with 16-year-olds, that's a small area for those boys. And if I'm doing that for 15 minutes at a time, it's probably not best practice. Whereas, can I be able to mix that up? Can I turn that into a 4v4 working in the middle with 4 on the outside, and the activity is only for 4 or 5 minutes and they rotate round? So we're just being clever with the area size that we use and the timings that we use, because there is that research there that says, yeah, everyone in a tight area and being in there for a long period of time, the more risky it is.
Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, you're still doing social distance training. We haven't moved away from that, and it's a good practice. It's really good practice.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's that good practice, and it's thinking about it. It's do our games right now in practice, if we're not playing against other teams, do they need to be 2:45 minutes? Can they be 3:30 minutes or 4:40 or 4:25s or something like that? Can we be smart in what we're doing? I'm sure the guys out there would love to have the luxury of working with 24 players on a full field. I'm sure they've got much smaller working areas. So again, it's being clever with what we can do and how long we are doing things for, and just being mindful of it, and actually going and I think it's helped with some of my coaching a little bit, because rather now of me coaching what I see and saying stop, stand there and do this, do that, and moving players around, I'm almost letting them go for the 3-4 minutes or the time set that I've got, and then being able to do it and recreate that time. And recreate the scenarios that happened. Sometimes I need to stop it there and then to show them the visual and the picture of what they've missed and wasn't quite right. But also other times I just need to let them go and let them get at it, and then talk in the breaks to the players. And then when I talk in the breaks to the players, I haven't got to talk to all of them. That could be my chance to talk to one or two on the side and go, okay, well, look at this. Well, how can you do better? What are your things that you're working on? And try and work with the players. So it's been more work from us, but again, I don't ever think you can be over planned for training and over organized, and this is just something that's helped us even more with our planning and organization to try and make it the best we can for our players.
Brilliant. Great. Thanks very much.
If there is any questions, guys, I probably have another, well, not long, maybe 5 minutes. If there is anything that anyone wants to ask, please.
And I'll certainly screen them, and I can always send them on to you as well, Andy, if anything comes in later. So I'll be happy to do that. Any final words, Chris?
Just a couple of final words from us. I'm conscious of the time, and there's other people presenting as well. But hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight of what's happening here back at Chelsea in the UK, and a little bit around our community domestic activities, which are all off-site of the training ground. But then Andy touching a little bit there on the academy and what they're having to go through. We know that it's very different, I suppose, in a way. There's very similarities within the measures and protocols that have been put in place, but I'm sure it's very different to potentially what you guys may be doing as well out there in the States. So hopefully that's just a little bit of an insight for you. And if there's any questions later on, Adam, please let us know. We might be able to get back to anybody. But thank you very much for having us. Been a pleasure to sort of present and give you this insight, and hopefully we can do a few more in the future. Appreciate you having us.
Absolutely. Tentatively, I know we talked about the next one as well for you guys to jump on, so that would be great. Andy, maybe one last shot from behind you. Maybe these guys can take a quick look at the pitch.
Yeah, I was about to finish off with, I hope you guys have a great afternoon in your nice warm houses, because I'm standing here and about to get really wet. So it's about to pour down. I don't know if you can see. Can you see the pitches?
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the purple bubble that I'm in right now. So this is just 1/4 of the Astro. I can't see my screen, so I can't see how far I'm showing you. But all the way up there is the academy building and our indoor arena. But we've even having talks with our staff right now. We're not going to be allowed to use that indoor facility right now, and we're being told to train outfield for the majority, or well, for everything that we do. We can't use any indoor space right now. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting one, but we're getting there and we're making the most of what we can do. It's just great to be back out on the field, and it's great to be getting the boys in and working hard. But thank you all very much for your time. Thank you again, Adam. Hopefully I'll get to see you very soon. And thanks for your time, guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of your call that you've got here. I'm off to get wet.
Thank you very much, Chris, Andy. Always a pleasure. We appreciate your time and everything you put forward for us today. So we'll be in touch. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, Adam. All right.
Take care. All right, Dan, I'm going to throw it over to you, and I'll let you share your screen so we can jump straight in. I think Chris might stick around for a little bit, and I'll certainly answer any questions, Q&A, as we go forward. I think everything is good. Hopefully we can hear you okay there, Dan.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, all good. It's all yours.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Pullen. I'm with K&K Insurance Group. What we do is we provide the insurance for Illinois Youth Soccer, as well as 52 other state soccer associations under USU Soccer, as well as other national governing bodies, a lot of soccer, but really pretty much all sports. K&K's been around since the early 50s. We are the largest, what we call managing general agent in the sports and recreation space. So we pretty much insure anything from the NFL to stock car racing to obviously amateur sports, Burning Man Festival. We even insure that, which was kind of surprising to me. But anyway, I want to be considerate of your time this morning. So what we're going to kind of talk about is really, we just kind of scratch the surface of, Illinois Youth Soccer, obviously as a coach or as a volunteer board member of a club, a member club, you have insurance benefits through your affiliation with Illinois Youth Soccer. So we're going to kind of briefly touch on the insurance coverages that you have as a coach, as well as what your club has, and also discuss some important risk management issues on that. So we'll go ahead and kick it off. As far as the insurance coverages that you have through your affiliation with Illinois Youth Soccer, you have 3 policies. You have your commercial general liability, your excess or umbrella liability, and your excess accident medical. And we'll go through each of those briefly to kind of give you a little insight on what exactly does that mean to you as a coach. Some coverages that Illinois Youth Soccer does not provide their membership, which they would need to procure on their own, would be what we call directors and officers insurance, or D&O insurance, commercial property coverage, which is really, provides insurance for damages to your stuff, whether it's buildings, equipment, your office contents, and so forth. And as well as they do not provide any type of employee or volunteer dishonesty coverage, which really just embezzlement of funds. And again, we'll kind of hit on all these shortly. So, as a coach, you do have a duty of care. What is a duty of care? It's in essence a duty not to harm somebody. Okay. So as a soccer coach, you have a duty to properly plan the activity, to provide proper instruction, to warn of inherent risk. We think that most people would understand that soccer is a contact sport and, they assume those risks, but that's not always the case. They can certainly allege that they weren't warned, that they didn't know that a portable soccer goal was, that they weren't supposed to, the child wasn't supposed to hang on it. And then unfortunately, if it's not secure appropriately, it could fall, tip over, and either severely injure the child or kill the child. So you have a duty to warn. You have a duty to provide a safe environment, which is really a duty to inspect. So as a soccer coach, when you're at practice, you have a duty. You have an obligation to make sure that that premises is free from any type of defects that may injure a person, whether that person is a player, a parent, another volunteer, or just someone in the general public. Okay, so did you make sure that soccer goal, if it was portable, that it's secure? Did you inspect the turf to make sure there weren't any defects? Maybe a sprinkler head was exposed. That could cause a player to trip and fall and hurt themselves. Are you providing, at the end of the day, whether it's important to understand as a coach and as a soccer organization is you have a duty to provide a safe environment, even for things that you may not think that you're responsible for, such as the parking lot. You're at a park and rec department or a school district, and grandma's coming to watch their son or daughter, or excuse me, their granddaughter play in a tournament, and they trip and fall in the parking lot. Well, is that your fault? Could you be held legally liable for it? And the short answer is yes, because even if you didn't own the premises and you weren't responsible for the maintenance of that premises, you still had a duty to provide a safe environment, okay, which is to make sure that, again, that the premises is free from any defects on that. Really, supervision, when we get a lot of lawsuits in, ones with the asterisks are kind of the 3 main ones. You have a duty to provide appropriate supervision to those players. So when that doesn't happen, when, you have a group of kids who are maybe jumping on a fence and they fall and hurt themselves or cut themselves, typically what we're going to see in the lawsuit is, hey, that coach was not providing adequate supervision. And so therefore you get that lawsuit in, they're going to name the soccer coach as an individual. They're going to name the club and they're also going to name Illinois Youth Soccer Association. So that plaintiff's attorney is going to do the kind of the shotgun approach and name anybody and everybody. So again, the important thing is you have a duty of care, which is a duty not to harm. So what happens when you breach that duty of care? Well, that's where we have negligence. Okay, and negligence is really just a failure to act with a certain level of care that an ordinary person would exercise in the same situation. So negligence is, pretty much you fail the reasonable and prudent standard. So what happens when someone alleges negligence? What insurance policy provides coverage for that coach, that volunteer, that employee, and the entities? Well, that's going to be, for the most part, it's going to be your general liability policy. Your general liability policy provides coverage for the acts of negligence. Okay, so the general liability policy provides coverage for really three main categories of claims. One is going to be bodily injury. Easy way to look at that is someone getting physically hurt. Okay, whether that is an athletic participant, a soccer player, or it could be a business invitee or a spectator on that. So here's an example of a claim that we had. This happened at a clinic that was on a Friday night before a tournament that was hosted by a club under a state soccer association. Long story short, the child ran off the playing field, chasing a ball or what have you, and he ran into this bleacher. Well, this bleacher right here, if you look at it, has no protective end cap. And as you can see by the amount of stitches, that was a pretty significant wound on that. So this claim actually settled for a little over $120,000. But again, that coach, that club, those volunteers, those employees had a duty to provide a safe environment. Well, obviously they breached that in this situation because they should have warned, or they should have known that was a risk and a defect. Here's another one. This is a bounce house. This actually happened on the East Coast about probably 10 years ago at a tournament. They had a couple bounce houses that weren't secured appropriately. Gust of wind picked up 3 of them. So when we look at this picture, there's actually individuals in there on that. So was there negligence on behalf of the club hosting a tournament? Well, they had a duty of care to provide a safe environment. They had a duty to make sure that those bounce houses, even though they used the vendor, that was still secured appropriately. And obviously that didn't happen there. So this was actually on Good Morning America, 10 years ago when it came out. So pretty scary thing. So just kind of think of those. Those are good examples of negligence. And as I alluded to, earlier, a premises liability, if you're a soccer club, you're a coach, a practice field, duty to provide a safe environment. This happened at a tournament. This lady was walking to watch her son or daughter playing a game, and she stepped in a drainage pipe that did not have a protective grate on it. So this is actually, it was about up to her knee on that, and the fire department had to dig her out. Was the soccer club, the volunteers, coaches at that tournament negligent? Well, the answer is yes. Their hand is they got called into it, even though it was a public field. Again, that mom was at that location because of the soccer club's activities. So therefore they have a duty of care on that. So, this claim, unfortunately, this lady was not hurt except for her pride. However, this claim did settle for $80,000 on that. So just kind of some things to think about. Bodily injury, also obviously sexual abuse, which is what we'll hit on later. Sexual abuse claims and portable goalpost claims falling down on a child tend to be our most catastrophic claims that we see, as far as insuring youth soccer associations. The second thing the general liability policy provides coverage for is personal and advertising injury. Really, as far as a coach is concerned or soccer club, it's really libel and slander, which is, just defamation of character. Maybe a coach puts something in an email and blasts it out to other people defaming another coach or another referee, where he or she knowingly put false information in there. that's defamation of character. That would be covered under the general liability policy. And third is property damage liability. Now, this is not damage to your stuff. This is when you or your organization, you as a coach, are accused of damaging someone else's property. From a soccer coach perspective, an easy or a good example is you're at practice and a player kicks a ball, it goes over a fence and it hits a car's windshield traveling down the road. Well, obviously that's third-party damage. Or what if there was a scoreboard, maybe you're having an indoor practice because of inclement weather and a player kicks a ball and damages the scoreboard. That's also a good example of property damage liability. Obviously, someone could allege that your negligence caused that to damage that person's property. So we know kind of what a general liability policy is, again, on a very high level viewpoint. So who's an insured under this policy? Well, obviously Illinois Youth Soccer, the entity, is an insured under the policy, but also all of its member associations, leagues, clubs, teams, directors and officers, coaches, players, referees, employees, and so forth. With the caveat is, but that last sentence, or the last part of the sentence is, but only for activities that are sanctioned by the first name insured. So your club, you as an individual coach, you're an insured under the insurance contracts procured by Illinois Youth Soccer, but only while you're conducting activities sanctioned by.
If there's anything, the best way to reach us and probably you is probably by email nowadays. So certainly pop us an email if we can certainly forward anything on to Dan as we need to. So, but we appreciate your time today, Dan. Thank you very much. A lot of good information, and people can reference this back on YouTube. So this would be good reference for them if they have questions concerning this. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Lee, I'm going to pass it over to you and continue on with this MLS is Back. Excited to hear about this goals project that you did. Over to Liam Lacy.
All right, Adam, thanks very much. Just share my screen. There we go. It should be up there now. Just before I get started, apologies for any background noise to everybody who's on the call. There's a few things going on in the house today, so hopefully it's not too distracting for you. So like everyone, I've had a little bit more time recently, and one of the things that I decided to do was to look at all the goals that were scored in the MLS's Back tournament that just finished in the middle of August. So a little bit of background about the project. I recently signed up for several of the Scottish FA online courses. So they've recently launched a course on performance analysis, and they've also got a range of courses on talent ID. So the performance analysis course was run by a guy who might be known to the state. He's known by United Soccer Coaches, US Soccer, the Scottish guy called Ian Donnelly. He's one of the experts in this field. So he took us through a whole process actually looking at the 36 of the Liverpool goals from last season and analysing them and breaking them down. So that was one thing that I did recently. I also was on a webinar with a lad called Charlie Mitchell. So Charlie Mitchell was a tactical analyst for the Welsh women's team, and he went through the 2019 Women's World Cup and analysed all of the tactical data to feed back to the Welsh team and to help them try and qualify for future World Cups. So that was two of the recent webinars and courses I was on. Around the same time, I also read an article by Michael Beale, who I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Michael is the first team coach at Rangers just now. He was also at Chelsea, so maybe Chris and those guys know him. He was at Liverpool, he moved to Sao Paulo, but he's also got a good presence on social media. So Michael looked at Harry Kane's goals in the 2016-2017 season. Again, broke down all 35 goals he scored, and he looked at it more of an individual level, but tracked where he finished, how he finished, and talked about it and how he might improve for future years. And then the final thing that influenced the project was the coverage from both ESPN and Fox Sports. So for ESPN, they had, they were calling it the AT&T aerial camera, which you can see here. So this is the view there for the AT&T aerial camera. On Fox Sports 1, they actually had like a blimp overhead, so you were able to see in much more detail more tactical parts of the game. So with all of those things contributing to this, I went ahead and started looking at the 146 goals that were throughout the tournament. So with those 146 goals, I clipped them all, saved them, and then I coded them. So I coded them looking at, as you'll see here, the type of finish, the number of touches to finish, and the time of the goals, whether it was an open play or a set piece. And then also looked at things like attackers in the box and then the distance from goal. So one that struck me immediately when I was looking at this was the time of the goals. So if you see there, the majority of the goals were scored towards the end of the game, 76 minutes and onwards. Now, when you look at it and when you think about where the tournament was, that potentially, again, you know, it's more for a discussion point, that potentially could be because of the heat down in Florida. And obviously players not having been in training for a while, they started to fatigue as the game went on, and that's where you saw the majority of the goals there. Interestingly, one of the things I found was the 9 AM games only had 1.75 goals a game, whereas the 10:30 onwards games actually had 3.06 goals a game. So those early kickoffs did not generate as many goals as the later games, and was actually one of the things a lot of the players complained about, was trying to play at that time, which I'm guessing a lot of us are familiar with from the tournaments and league games at 7 and 8 AM in the morning. So with regards to touches to finish, as you would expect, you know, one touch finish was predominantly the main way that the teams finished. Again, some of the other data is kind of as you would expect. The more runners into the box, the more chances there were to finish. The closer to the goal, the more chance you had to finish. But what I did from this is I then went in and took the general data and I looked at it in a team sense. So this is an example from the Portland Timbers. So again, I broke down every goal, and then you can see here where most of the goals were scored. So Portland Timbers only had 1 goal from outside the box. They mainly tried to work the ball in to this central channel, and you can see 12 out of the 14 goals were scored in this goal zone. Again, as you would expect, majority of goals finished into the corners. And breaking down their goal data, very similar to the tournament data, where majority of finishes were 1 touch. Biggest difference here was in the open play versus set piece. So for Portland, they had only scored from open play up until the semi-final, and then all 4 of their goals from the semi-final into the final were actually set pieces, either kicks or corners. So the other thing that was slightly different for Portland was the time of the goals. So they scored the majority of the goals from the 61st to the 75th minute. Again, speculating, but one of the reasons I think that may be is due to the water break, or as they were calling it, the coaching break that they had in the tournament. And the coach, Gio Savarese, was, you know, very animated, very involved, very active during that time, and quite often it led to them coming out and scoring a goal there. So that was quite interesting. I also recently, just this week, had a look at the Philadelphia Union, because their map is slightly different. So Philadelphia Union, they only scored 9 goals, so the Portland scored 14. They only scored 9, but for the most part, they were actually scoring from around the goal zone. So a couple from outside the box, and then these goals were, I think Bedoya was one, Alejandro Bedoya, and El Sino was the other. and they were coming down the side, cutting in, and then shooting across the goal, which again accounts for this here, where you can see most of the finishes into the corner. You can also see that reflected within their data here, where they scored most of the goals from a little bit further out in comparison to Portland Timbers and in comparison to the overall data. Just before I go on to discuss how I've used this data within player development, Adam, do you have any questions? Marek, any questions on that? Anything you want to revisit? Or is there any questions in the chat? Because I don't think I can see it here.
Yeah, nothing yet. I just put a note into the chat. I haven't seen anything yet, so I think continue on.
Okay, thanks. So hopefully you can see these videos, because this is how, you know, taking the data, taking the trends, I suppose, from the tournament, and then trying to use it in different ways. So obviously you could use it for opposition analysis, you could use it for scouting, you could use it for talent ID. For me, in the youth environment, in the college environment, I've tried to use the clips as examples to show the players, and then even build some activities off of it so they can actually see it. Because sometimes I think when we're out there coaching, the players don't always see exactly what it is we're, you know, talking about. So here's one example. This is one where I've seen it many times on training fields across the state, but it's probably a good example of what we would term the up, back, and through. So if I play it from here. So you see in transition, win it, up, back, through, and then they're into that goal zone to finish there. So for this one, I just think it's a good one where that's potentially a combination that a lot of us will look to use within sessions. This allows you to show the players it beforehand or show them during the practice on an iPhone, iPad, whatever it may be. This one's slightly different. Again, it's in transition. But this one I would use to, and again, hopefully it's running. Again, I would use this to highlight the different type of transition and the need to, you know, get runners into the attack even when you're on a breakaway. So if you look here, you'll see 4 runners into the attack against 3. So that's a slightly different transition. Again, you could actually use that one for coaching the defenders on not running towards each other and allowing them that clean run into the half. But it just shows different types of goals, and can be used for, you know, positional play, or even if you want to reinforce principles or a game model if anybody's building that out. So for me, this is how I used it. Oh, sorry. Let's see. There we go. So I used this with a 2006 boys group at Crystal Lake, one of the teams I'm currently working with. And this is one of the activities that I designed. So you'll see here it's a 2v2 in the center and then breaking into a 3v1 and try to use the striker. So try and start with the red team. They have the ball. They try and score in the 2 small goals. Hopefully the blue team win it. They either find the striker or they can drive out and they can go to goal as a 3. And then you can progress it on and include, you know, one more going back for 3v2 or another going back for 3v3. But more importantly, linked to the analysis, you're trying to encourage them to work the ball into that area that's marked with the yellow flags there. So you're trying to encourage them to get into that zone and potentially finish one touch, because we know that that's, you know, potentially a much higher percentage scoring opportunity. Again, I wrote down in the possible questions and discussions how you might then tie in the videos to the discussions you're having with the team on the field. So, you know, what do the Sounders do to combine? Well, that's your up, back, and through. Or what do Philly do when they win it and break to run into the full half? I do have the video. Let me see. Let me see if I can bring that up. So come up with this. I'll show you what it actually looks like.
Just
in
real quickly,
practice.
Liam, as you're going through this, would you show did you show the players when you did that on an iPad, a clip ahead of time? How did you do that?
I talked them through it. So I
Okay.
talked the players through it, yeah. And then I've got the clips to include in the follow-up. But I did have it on my iPad. I just didn't show them it in this case. But you can do that. You can take it out on your phone. You can take it on your iPad. You could show, specific examples to the striker. However you want to do it, just to reinforce those messages.
Yeah.
So this is what it looked like. So the white team are trying to build to the 2 goals. And then the blue team win it, break the goal, and you try to get the runners in to finish in the box. I'd like to say they all look like that, but it took me quite a while to choose that one and pick it out just to show everyone. So yeah, that's kind of how I got the data, how I went through the process, and then how I would use it within my own coaching. And it was a little quick, a little rushed, but I wanted to make sure I got it in and was respectful of everybody's time.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that, and I know certainly from a clip standpoint, you spend a lot of time putting all these things together, analyzing, the teams and looking at how you can kind of create this situation where you can then go into some type of a learning activity. What would be, if you was to do it again, what were some of the things that you found were the most difficult as you went through this process in terms of just that clipping and then relating it to the field session?
I mean, the clipping, the main thing is the time it takes.
Yeah.
Like any sort of coding, as anyone involved in the performance analysis will know, it takes forever to clip it and then code it and go through it all in more detail. That's the part that takes time. And then I suppose the biggest thing for me was I went through it, but then I decided to add in attackers into the box. So I actually went through it, got the touches, got the area of the goal, built out those maps, but I didn't have the number of attackers in the box. So I went back to the 146 goals to then get that runners into the box data. So I suppose for me, it would be deciding on exactly what data I needed or wanted out of it from the start, so I didn't have to rewatch every video 3, 4, 5 times. Yeah. That would probably be the biggest thing, deciding on exactly what I need out of it or want out of it. Right. And again, like one of the things that makes me a little uneasy is comparing pro players to youth soccer, but it's not showing them the video and saying you should be doing this. It's showing them the video and saying, look, here's some ideas, here's the kind of frame of reference to what we're talking about here, rather than just talking through it. Because as we've discussed before, not every player is watching the game. Not everybody will have been aware that MLS's back was even on. You could use any league, you could use any tournament. But I think the more you can actually show them, the easier it is to understand and then potentially put it into the game.
Yeah, you're definitely painting the picture.
Yeah.
Obviously now, kids are spending a lot of time on computers. They're seeing a lot of pictures. There are a lot of things that they can then relate to. They can then copy that. I know for me as a kid, I would just watch a lot of TV back then and just watch what Paul Gascoigne did and try and emulate that. But now you can watch videos and different things. And is there a particular... Go ahead.
I was going to say to you, I don't know if you remember, there was a video that came out called Goals, 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 the 92-93 season. And I remember that was 101 goals, I think it was, the first season of the Premier League, and try to recreate those goals. Not very well. Or even 94-95, I think, when Tony Yeboah scored that volley for Leeds. Yeah. How many times did you go down the park and hammer a ball at goal, hoping that it hit the crossbar and went in? And then run away screaming Yeboah. Those sort of things are maybe lost a little, but we've got to find different ways to bring them back to the players.
I totally agree. Yeah, if they can see something, then they can try and emulate it. I totally agree with that. So no, that's really
it links a little to there's a lot of what we've worked on in the D license and the grassroots with reality-based coaching. Like, what does the game look like? What are you preparing them for? this is it, basically. This is what the game looks like, especially as you get older, and if you do have kids looking to go to college or into the pros, like, what are you preparing them for? What's the game like at that level? And then you can show them, and then you can potentially work either team practices around it or individual work around it. You know? That's how I would tie it in.
Yeah. Well, and the great thing with video, and what's really nice is IYSA has a good link with the video system, VO. So then, you know, certainly if people are interested in doing that, they can certainly video their sessions, especially now with a lot of inner squads going on, which is great. So obviously you've been using that system and you've been doing it. So it's extremely beneficial. It's easy to work with. So obviously you can see that from your footage as well. And we're doing more of it. You know, more coaches are doing it, and we now have a little bit more time to maybe strategize a little bit, especially if we're not playing as many games.
Yeah, and I'm happy to share any of that data, any of the slides. I think I sent Adam the full session plan from the practice that I just showed you with the boys, so Adam can attach those or send them out. There's one that's just got the diagrams on it, and there's one that's actually got the videos on it as well. So I'm happy to share any of that, or if anybody does want to try recording themselves, I can certainly talk through the process I go through to do that as well.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Thank you. And like I said, certainly the people on the call today, I'll make sure we send those clips out. Doesn't look like there's any questions here, but we'll certainly send that information out to anybody who requests it. Just pop me an email at the end. So Liam, I really appreciate your time, and information was fantastic. So gives us all as coaches some ideas on how to better, create a training session just from video clips that we're doing. So appreciate that. Thanks again.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
No problem. All right. I know Chris is going to be up next. I think Mary Jane, can you hear me? I think you wanted to mention just one quick thing concerning the insurance. Can you hear me okay, Mary Jane? I'll ask her to unmute.
Okay.
There you go. We can hear you.
Thank you. I think in fair disclosure to everybody, I want people to be, our members to be aware that Illinois Youth Soccer has additional insurance coverage restrictions regarding tryouts, individual trainings based on safe sport, and amusement type equipment based on our claims history. So it's very important for you to know what those restrictions are when you opt to participate.
All right. Thank you, Mary Jane. We appreciate it. So I'm just going to pass it over to Chris real quick.
Yep. Morning or afternoon, everybody. Unfortunately, I don't have much for everybody. And I say unfortunately just because that means we don't have really any changes to the protocols and the allowable activities from the state yet. So everything from our last presentation in August still remains the same. I also just want to let everybody know, we don't have any additional information that we're holding back. The second we get details from the state and we're able to understand what they're allowing us to do, we try to get that information out to everybody as quickly as possible so you can adjust properly. So did want to bring up that we have heard from some clubs who have been reported to the Department of Public Health for violation of the state guidelines. Some have had state officials come to a practice and are out there counting players and observing what they're doing, and others have had to submit documentation on their guidelines and their protocols. So it's really important that you're staying in track with that, because all it takes is for one parent who's already nervous about returning to play, not like what you're doing, and report you, and you would be left to deal with the consequences from the state if you're not following those guidelines. And it's also just important that we're following these so that we can hopefully progress sooner than later to getting sports back to being played. So, and we certainly don't want soccer activities to be the reason that's held back. So we have finally got a direct contact within the state government agencies that we've submitted soccer specific guidelines to, with the hopes that we'll be able to make some adjustments with the state to get us back to playing. but so far we haven't heard anything yet. So that's kind of the update of where we're at, just as far as protocols and everything like that. For those teams that were registered for State Cup and President's Cup for the fall, for those high school age girls, we sent a message out a week or so ago. If we're back playing by September 28th, we'll keep the currently posted dates to get everything going. Teams will have the opportunity. If there are some teams that need to drop or anything, you'll still have that opportunity. And if we're beyond September 28th, we'll adjust as we need to. So, and then for the Midwest Conference, they have extended the boys' high school application period a couple weeks. So if you have not completed that yet, you still have some time to do so. So that is all that I have at this time.
All right, I'll jump on. I think there was something in the chat there, Chris, if you want to check that. So as Chris is checking that, just a couple of quick things from me on my end in terms of updates. We are going to be starting some coaching education again this weekend. We've already gone through a couple of weekends of coaching education in a blended format. Please make sure if you've got any females that are willing and wanting to jump on this course, we still have openings. The first part of that starts on Thursday. So we do a virtual part of it for 2 hours in the evening. And then we'll end up doing a field session on Saturday evening. So we work closely with Samantha Johnson, from the formerly of the Chicago Red Stars, as well as Chicago City, with the use of their field. So we appreciate their help. But we're really excited to be offering this. So if you have any female coaches that want to be part of this, please let me know. It's going to be very accessible for them from a financial standpoint. So we want to make sure we work with them as best as possible. In terms of upcoming courses, we've got a few courses that are going to be coming up. So again, check our website, check the Learning Center. Make sure that you jump on there to see if there's coaches that you need to get set up in terms of preparation when we are able to get leagues going at some time, hopefully fairly soon. So just make sure that you have the coaches ready to go. We did have that pandemic adaptation that we had set up. But now that we are able to run these blended learning courses, we do ask that all the coaches jump on all these courses. And we've got a few more, and we'll be adding more as we go through, especially with the weather the way it is. And then the upcoming D-license courses, we'll be starting those in October. We're still finalizing dates. We're waiting on curriculums to be set and information to be set. I know I've had a lot of interest on these D-licenses, which is great. Basically, within the D-license, it's going to be a 10-week virtual blended learning format, and then we'll be finishing up on the field in March. So again, this would be a great opportunity for coaches to be able to jump in on a D-license. As soon as we get all of the information together, we'll be posting that ASAP. And then again, we'll always offer our ability to touch base with you. So certainly from an ODP standpoint, coaching education standpoint, both myself and Marek will be available for you. So we've done a few of these already in the past, but if we need to talk to your clubs about anything that's going on, whether it be coaching ed, ODP, we're available. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. I know we've already had a few people do that. We'll be happy to jump on a Zoom call evenings, no matter what time. We'll work around your schedule to do whatever we can. And certainly, depending on whatever you choose that you need, we'll be happy to cater for your club and for your program. Also, we have virtual hours. So if there's a question that pops up, we sit around a computer on a Tuesday morning and a Tuesday evening. So we're there open for you. If anything pops up, you got a question, certainly, like I've mentioned before, we're not going to answer any of your concerns and issues concerning referees or anything like that, but we'll be happy to help you from a coaching education standpoint, ODP, club development, anything that we can do, we'll be happy to help you. So catch us on a Tuesday morning. Marek will be Tuesday mornings. I take typically in the evening on Tuesday nights. Had quite a few, information concerning ODP. It's coming soon. We're finalizing and trying to get everything set. concerning all of the information together. I know there's going to be some information coming out very quickly concerning the ODP Interregional for players that were involved this past year. So be prepared for that, for any of your players that may have gotten involved in that. But we're working on finalizing details, making sure that we've got everything. So as soon as we get that together, we'll make sure that we send that out ASAP. And finally, you know, again, it looks like we're in this virtual format for certainly for a while. So we want to make sure that we keep in contact with you. I think I know Chris and Andy have already chatted about maybe coming back on and doing another little presentation. We'll certainly work on some other people and groups that have been working with us as well. And certainly, if you have anybody that you feel would be a good person to come in, we'll be happy to listen to them. I think that would be good. So put that in your notebooks. December the 2nd, 2020, 10 a.m. to 12 noon. We want to make sure that we stay in touch with you and certainly give you any updates. And certainly, if there's any updates from our playing standpoint, we'll make sure we do that. So. Chris, real quick, anything from you?
There is one question that came up asking if we can hold tryouts in October. The answer to that would be with soccer being designated as a medium risk sport by the state of Illinois. At this time, you know, the allowable activities, as everybody should be familiar with, is static groups of 25 for training and scrimmages. So the idea of a traditional tryouts where different kids are coming in and trying out within a group that at this time that's not allowable. So again, things remain fluid with what potentially could change in the future, but your traditional tryout process, that wouldn't be something you'd be able to continue to do at this time. But again, hopefully we'll see some changes in the near future.
Great. Well, we appreciate your time today. So right at a little after 12 o'clock. So pretty good time. Again, I want to thank our presenters, certainly Liam and Dan and Chris and Andy. We appreciate your time coming on today and sharing some great information. And certainly I can be a resource if you want that information. We'll be posting this here on our YouTube channel. So if you don't subscribe, please do. Lots of good information on there. And again, thanks again, everybody, for being part of our virtual Coaches Connection. And we'll see you back in December. Thanks, everybody.